Good evening. This is yet another Sharia Crime Stoppers webinar. We're so glad you're with us tonight. And it's a special night because we have the co-founder, we might even say the godfather of Sharia Crime Stoppers. That would be David Boris. David, hi, how you doing?
Good, Dick. So nice to be with you and our audience again. We're going to be talking about an important topic tonight about deception.
And so before we do that, let me remind everybody, this isn't recording, so we are not going to do live Q&A. We will, however, invite you to look at the bottom of this first slide and look at the contact info, spearpoint911 at shariacrimestoppers.org. Send any questions that you have, and we'll do our best to get the answers to you. Again, spearpoint911 at shariacrimestoppers.org. With that, we'll pitch it over to David. David, if you're ready to begin, why don't we get going?
All right, and we're going to be talking about Muslima Deceivers tonight. We'll follow up at the end with some action items, and I strongly suggest that you have pen and paper ready because some of the information you might want to take down so you can properly challenge the people who are trying to deceive us. So deception is part of warfare, and according to Sharia, we're in the house of war, land not yet controlled by Islam. Tonight's focus, Muslim women who are deceiving us about Islam. They use a variety of methods of subterfuge and delusion. We'll also look at a couple of male deceivers as well, and some courageous women who are trying to warn us. So why are women being used to deceive us? Because non-Muslim women, and even some Muslim women, have so much to lose under Sharia, it's important that the true nature of it be totally obfuscated. The ideological basis for Islamic deception is found here in the classic manual of Islamic sacred law, agreed to by both Sunni and Shia Muslims. But first, let's get ourselves oriented on the nature of the grand jihad or third jihad, the threat that's against us. We know there's two axes, one on the left, which is the overt, violent terrorist attacks that we're all too familiar with. But many of us don't realize that there is also the indirect or subversive axes of attack, championed by the Muslim Brotherhood, financed by Saudi Arabia and others, or known as the soft jihad. Both axes complement each other. So three key words to unlock the code of deception under Sharia. The first is taqiyya, or sacred lying, to protect Muslims when in the house of war, when they're in a minority status, and to protect Islam from harm, or to protect Islam for any critical analysis to show what it truly is. If promoting Islam can be achieved by the truth, then lying is forbidden. Otherwise, it is obligatory to lie, especially as the ultimate goal, which is to make Sharia the dominant law of the land, is obligatory. The second word is kitman, or telling a partial truth, creating a misrepresentation of the facts, deliberately omitting all facts. One example that I often use is the statement that Islam is a religion of peace. Well, peace under Islam is not defined as coexistence. It's defined when Sharia is the law of the land. Then there will be peace. Or that the Muslim Brotherhood is against terrorism. Well, they are, because the Muslim Brotherhood knows that Muslims cannot commit terrorism. Terrorism is only committed against Muslims. Muslims are involved in jihad, which is a holy war, and we'll talk more about that later. When I give these training classes to law enforcement, I remind students, especially law enforcement officers, they're the victims of deception and lying every day. And we have to develop our own ways of getting to the truth. In the words of the grandson of the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, Tariq Ramadan, he says, quote, "I must speak in a way that is appropriate for the ear hearing me, yet faithful to the Islamic sources of authority. We must know how to speak to those who don't share our history." Ramadan is a leading Islamic figure throughout Europe. This is how obfuscation plays out. As long as the speaker is faithful to true Islam, the ends justify the means. And then there's the big loophole of deception that is found in Maruna, or the total suspension of any Sharia prohibition in order to achieve a higher Islamic interest or benefit. One example is Abedin being allowed to marry a former Jewish congressman and work for Hillary Clinton. Now, the law that she's breaking is that we all know Muslim women cannot marry outside the faith, not to mention marry a Jew. So what's the higher goal for the cause of Islam here that she is given a pass on this rule? Well, access to classified information and documents when she served with Hillary Clinton in the State Department, and more importantly, her ability to influence a major political figure in the United States. Another example is Farhana Carrera, director of the Muslim Advocates, the group that demanded all federal training to be purged that connects terrorism to Islam in 2011. Ingrid Mattson is a former president of to the left of her, let me read the statement that she's making. Our history is not a history of marginalization and exclusion of women. Ours is a history of empowerment of women. We're not trying to invent something new. We're trying to pick up where we left off. Indeed, they are. This statement is wrong on so many levels. Are women empowered through female genital mutilation, child marriages, and rape? Aren't women excluded when they must dress covered and remain in the house, not to mention excluded by their husbands when they can be beaten? Both women are given a pass of the exemption of the Sharia rule that men don't work for women in a subordinate role, as we see here revealed in chapter 4, verse 34. Also, Carrera is not obligated to follow Islamic dress codes requiring women to be covered. So what's the deception? Sharia empowers women, they are equal to men, and nothing for non-Muslim women to fear. But wait, 3 verses in the Quran where Allah claims to be the best deceiver. The words in the Quran belong to Him, Allah. They inspire followers to submit by doing what He commands or not doing what He forbids. Shireen Pasha claims to have been born and raised a Muslim who initially was led to believe jihad represented bloodshed and bombs with bearded men waving Kalashnikovs. Now she realized this connotation is all wrong, that jihad really represents her inner struggle, her daily struggle to get out of bed and get her children ready for school. A similar belief is promoted by Bushra Alwi of the Detroit FBI office, who told a local group of peace officers her jihad was a struggle against cheesecake. Both minimize the historic meaning of jihad, which means warfare to advance the religion. Returning to Shireen Pasha, she at least acknowledges there is a problem with sexual misconduct against women. Pasha is an assistant professor of journalism at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. The problem with Pasha is her unwillingness to admit Islam's historic problem of Muslim men abusing and sexually attacking Muslim and non-Muslim women, especially through honor violence and rape. Here's another Muslim woman who can't face the facts. By all appearances, Dr. Kunta Ahmed is a Muslim to be trusted. She claims to be with Trump in his first fight against radical Islam and does not follow the Sharia stipulation that a righteous woman must be covered. In fact, on Fox News, she denies that the requirement for women to be covered at all. One verse that commands women to be totally covered is this one. O Prophet, tell your wives and daughters to draw their veils all over their bodies so that they will be known and not harmed. We'll come back to this a bit later. Unfortunately, this isn't all Ahmad gets wrong. Recently, Ahmad spoke out against Ilhan Omar's anti-Semitism on Fox. but never addresses where Omar's anti comes from. Notice how Ahmad claims Omar has misinterpreted Islam. This is a common tactic of apologists to distort facts that get in the way. Allah himself has a lot to say about anti-Semitism, these verses reveal, and so too does Muhammad. Facts ignored by Ahmad. So who was interviewing Ahmad on Fox? Why no follow-up questions challenging her assertions? Maybe because of how Judge Jeanine Pirro was handled by Fox News when she asked pressing questions about Omar and her faith. Farina Kazi has written The Invisible Martyrs Inside the Secret World of Female Islamic Radicals. She was born a Muslim in Pakistan, taught classes for the military and Department of Homeland Security. Notice how she promotes the same deception as Kunta Ahmed. She's also an apologist for Islam. Here she obviously attempts to lead us in the opposite direction from 1400 years of Islamic jihad. And she makes this outlandish statement how Muslim women choose to follow a perverted form of Islam. And she claims that Muhammad promoted the status of women, but totally ignores his marriage to a 6-year-old girl that he consummated when she was 9, and whom Muhammad later assaulted for disobedience. Kazi also declares violent jihad has nothing to do with Islam. Unfortunately, Kazi is at total odds with the teachings of the 4 schools of Sunni jurisprudence, as well as the consensus of Muslim scholars about classical Islamic threat doctrine. Kazi has been previously employed at the Central Intelligence Agency, where she claims to be the first Muslim employee, and she was able to totally mislead her associates about Islamic threat doctrine. Undeterred, Kazi continued to her fantasy Islam beliefs. In an article published on November 29th, 2018, not only did she claim Islam is still misunderstood, misappropriated, and misinterpreted, she continues to characterize Islam as a loving, peaceful religion and perpetuates the myth of peaceful Islam. But is there such a thing as moderate Islam? Let's turn to Tariq Recep Erdogan, the current prime minister and head leader of Turkey, that says the term moderate Islam is ugly, offensive. There is no moderate Islam. Islam is Islam. And reported just yesterday by Christine Douglas Williams on November 20th, so much for moderate Islam. And then there's the mayor of London, who calls moderate Islam an Uncle Tom. Sadiq Khan says Muslims who embrace a diluted form of Islam are being subservient to the West. And a senior Shia cleric in Iran, Yosef Tabar Ahmadinejad, says non-revolutionary Islam is American Islam. In other words, it's deceptive, it's not Islamic, and a fabrication of Western apologetics. Clearly, Kazi has a big problem. Why is it that we don't want to believe what Muslim leaders and clerics are telling us about Islam? Is it because the truth is too hard to accept? Plato said a long time ago, it takes courage to know what to fear. Next is another example of Muslim deception, similar to Farina Kazi's claim that Islam is peaceful. Debbie Almontasser is hawking her new book, Leading While Muslim, The Experience of American Muslim Principles After 9/11, in which she continues to promote the victim narrative and again insists jihadists have nothing to do with Islam. This canard is what's being taught in our schools by the media and by many government officials, while totally ignoring the in the Quran commandments against non-Muslims, as we see here referred to in chapter 9, verse 5, and followed by chapter 9, verse 29. Two more examples of the deceivers among us, Mania Shak and Linda Sassur. Mania Shak is an example of what one woman can do to promote peaceful Islam. For following the San Bernardino attack, Shak placed newspaper ads inviting people to meet a Muslim at a local coffee shop. 100 people showed up, and more gatherings were held later in San Francisco, Arizona, and Atlanta. So far, over 150 presentations have been given by Muslims meeting a Muslim. A network group that is involved in Muslim outreach by promoting such verses of peace like found in chapter 5, verse 32. We ordained for the children of Israel that if anyone slew a person, it would be as if he slew the whole people. And if anyone saved their life, it would be as he saved the life of the whole people. This verse is often quoted to demonstrate how serious Islam considers murder and how precious it is to save the life of another person. What Shak and others don't tell their listeners is what's in the very next verse, verse 33. The only reward of those who make war upon Allah is his messenger, will be that they will be killed or crucified or have their hands and feet on alternate sides cut off. Another verse that Shak and other Muslim deceivers often quote is found here in the 109th chapter, verse 1. Unto you your religion, unto me mine. Or this one, there shall be no compulsion of religion. Both purport to show that Islam allows others to worship as they please and does not force anyone to accept Islam. What these deceivers don't say is that the penalty may face for leaving Islam. As this young woman, Asiya Babi, found out, who served 8 years on death row in Pakistan, charged for blasphemy for being a Christian, who was recently released to safety in Canada. Another example of a convert of Christianity, this one from Saudi Arabia, Rafaif Mohammed El-Quinn, age 18. Apostasy under Islamic law is a capital offense. So what becomes of the peaceful abrogated verses that still serve a purpose, especially when Muslims are in a minority status? When they are few in number, these verses are followed to appease the majority, like us, that there is nothing to fear. This is taqiyya in action. These verses were received while Muhammad was in Mecca. It was not until 622, when he and his followers left Mecca for Medina, when true Islam was revealed in such commands from Allah like this one, found in chapter 9, verse 29. Remember the doctrine of abrogation that voids the peaceful verses of Mecca with the final commands from Allah received later in Medina. And one more point to remember: if there's no compulsion in the religion of Islam, why are apostates to be killed for leaving it? We'll never let a peaceful verse go to waste when it can be used to deceive, especially when there are 124 to choose from. 3 more examples of Shak's deception. American women were given the right to vote in 1920. We're going to celebrate it next year. No Islamic state granted voting rights prior to that date, for it wasn't until 1930 that Turkey authorized Muslim women to vote, and it wasn't until 2015 when Saudi Arabia finally followed suit. Shak also claims that wife beating has nothing to do with Sharia. But what about this verse? Men are in charge of women, so good women are obedient, and of whom you fear rebellion, preach to them, separate from their beds, or scourge them. Finally, she promotes, we're all one big happy family, but again fails to tell the real story that Allah commands that Muslims not take Christians and Jews as friends, as seen in chapter 5, verse 51. So what does the Quran have to say about Shak's claims? Let not the believers take for friends or helpers unbelievers rather than believers. You who believe, do not take as intimate friends from among others than your own people. And one more for good measure. This is the doctrine of loyalty and enmity under Sharia. Either Shak doesn't know what's in the Quran or she's purposely deceiving us. Let me illustrate how this doctrine of loyalty and enmity plays out by a statement made recently by Ilhan Omar. Note she refers to, quote, some people did something on 9/11. She never refers to who the attackers were, for if she was to do so, she would be disloyal to Muslims, and she can't do that. CARE was actually founded in 1994 when it morphed from the Islamic Association of Palestine, the fundraising arm of Hamas in America. Another part of the deception concerns the propaganda about Islam promoted in our classrooms that we talked about last month. The spokesperson is Huda Essa from Dearborn, founder of Culture Links, LLC. Her client list includes universities and colleges all across this country. She glorifies Islam, condemns and disparages Christianity and Judaism. At a recent workshop, 400 teachers attended, and none challenged Issa's assertions that terrorism isn't Islam, that white males are more dangerous, that Muslim women are victims of Islamophobia, and that no wife beating is allowed under Sharia. A clear statement on how Allah accepts Muslim husbands to treat their wives. You wives are a tilth or a field unto you. So approach your tilth or your wife when and how you will. This is sex on demand. And remember these two verses. This verse, men are in charge of women because Allah hath made the one of them to accept over the other, that permits wife beating. Linda Sarsour is the new icon of the feminist progressive movement. Note the one-finger salute and her promotion of jihad against Trump. She also promotes the lie that female genital mutilation is not Islamic. But the classic manual of Islamic sacred law says otherwise. Circumcision women, and it talks about that major surgery is involved. Representing the Assembly of Muslim Jurists is Dr. Hatim El-Ghaleh, who makes this statement about FGM. Cut, but not excessively, more conducive to the brightness of the face of the women and better for the husband. And then there's Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, the leading Islamic scholar today and the spiritual leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, who claims female genital mutilation has health benefits for women and certainly sexual benefits for their spouses. Don't be fooled by this angelic face. Avet Obare, New Jersey housewife of 2 daughters. She has a 600,000 Facebook following and promotes the return of the caliphate, opposes declaring the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, just another deceiver for the fundamentalist movement. 2 of the 57 Muslims recently elected last year to a local, state, or federal office are seen here. These are examples of 2 women not attempting to deceive us, who are very open about their anti-Semitism and their promotion of anti-Zionism. Ilhan Omar, a refugee from Somalia, is now representing Minnesota's 5th Congressional District, while Rashid Tlaib was elected to the 13th district in Michigan. In 2017, following the San Bernardino attack, the Minnesota State Legislature voted to prevent insurance payments to families of terrorists who attack Americans. Ilhan Omar voted against the bill that was eventually passed and signed into law. What this clearly demonstrates is that she is a team player for the subversion being waged against us through the soft jihad. Not only does she not want to prevent insurance payments to terrorist jihadi families, she doesn't want to prevent FGM either. While Rashida Tlaib has something to say about Israel as well, our own United West posted this about her on November 13, 2018. Here Tlaib drapes herself in the Palestinian flag and participates in a pro-Shia rally in 2014. Speaking about support for terrorists or jihadists, Tlaib and Omar are in good company, with 99 of their Marxist Democrat colleagues signing letters of support for CARE, the fundraising arm for Hamas in America. And we wonder why we can't designate the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. And as recently reported by Ryan Murrow of the Clarion Intelligence Network, our next crop of Democratic presidential candidates support this Hamas and Muslim Brotherhood front group as well. Omar Suleiman was chosen to give the invocation to Congress on May 9th of this year during Ramadan. He has a history of strong anti-Semitism and support for the designated terrorist group Hamas. His prayer included, "We pray for peace. Remember what peace means under Sharia." Speaking of lists, here's another that shows the top 10 university leaders who support terrorism. Well, money talks. For example, Saudi Arabia has given over $614 million to elite universities in America since 2011. Speaking of awards involving CARE, here's one proclaiming December 9, 2018, CARE Texas Houston Day by Mayor Sylvester Turner, another progressive, another useful idiot of the red-green axis. Speaking of elected dupes, as reported by Robert Spencer on November 15th of this year, Stephen Reed was sworn in on November 19th as Montgomery's first black mayor and celebrated with readings from the Bible, Torah, and Quran. What do you bet these verses from the Quran didn't make the cut? And here's another dupe, one we all recognize, right into the hands of the hijack crowd. Peaceful Islam has been perverted by a small group of terrorists. But what does Allah say? What does He command Muslims to do? Totally ignored by Kilmay. Speaking of books, don't rush to purchase the recently released book, Sharia Law, What Everyone Needs to Know, by two apologists, John Esposito and Atana J. Dolong-Bas, who totally whitewashed the misogynistic and violent aspects of Islam. And this book, also reviewed by Rabin Ibrahim, Crusade and Jihad, the 1,000-Year War Between Muslim World and the Global North, by William R. Polk, that virtually ignores the first 1,000 years of Islamic conquest of Christianity in Christian countries until jihadists were finally defeated at the gates of Vienna in 1683. Another form of deception, Muslim doctors who don't have their patients' best interests, especially Jews, at heart. Lar Khalab, employed at the Cleveland Clinic, and dentist Nasreen Zaid from Ohio. Both support genocide. And a third Muslim doctor, Dr. Javid Pazwaz, publicized on November 10, 2019 by Pamela Geller, The Dr. of Virginia. This constitutes a demographic jihad in reverse by targeting non-Muslim women. And then there's the Writers Guild of America and the Muslim Public Affairs Council, who recently called on Hollywood to continue its misleading portrayal of Islam. All superbly documented by Deborah Weiss in her 2018 book, Islamic Influence in Hollywood, in which she documents the censorship, disinformation, and the infiltration within the movie industry that promotes Islam as peaceful, loves Christians and Jews, and has no nexus to terrorism. Now for some good news. Muslim women taking a stand against so-called extremist versions of Islam, in particular Wahhabism or the state religion of Saudi Arabia. As reported on November 20th of last year by Mahani Naza in the publication Muslim World Today. Naza has found nearly 300 Muslim women who are taking positive steps to counter Islam's treatment of women. One member is Dr. Humaira Ahmed Kumar, 52, from Florida, who says that she is tired of the misogynistic, patriarchal, judgmental bigots who currently control the face of Islam, as well as the radical Wahhabi Muslims who espouse narrow, rigid, anti-women views. The group they belong to involves women who are secular-minded, enlightened, moderate, and some are not practicing Muslims at all, but are more cultural in nature. Here are two women who went public in 2015, Muslim women asking non-Muslim women not to wear the hijab in solidarity with Muslims, followed by an article in New York Times by Asra Nomani and Hala Harafa, two Muslim activists. But wait, two women who didn't pay any attention to their pleas for support. These are the enablers of cultural Islamization, collaborators in the civilization jihad sponsored by the Muslim Brotherhood. So let's take a closer look at the hijab and how it's now referred to as a fashion accessory to minimize the true significance of it. Don't be deceived by how our fashion designers promote clothing for Muslim and non-Muslim women, all designed to enable Islamization of our culture and to trick women to believing there is nothing to fear from Sharia dress codes. Sports Illustrated recently jumped on the bandwagon featuring Halima Aden, its first model in a hijab. This is all Sharia compliance on steroids, when in actuality, Muslim and non-Muslim women have a lot to fear. But the deception continues, this one promoted by Talib with her own fashion line from Palestine. Reported on March of the year, the Muslim Brotherhood sponsored this billboard promoting the hijab in Dallas, Texas. In response, Pamela Geller tried to post this billboard showing Muslim women who have been killed and murdered for not wearing the hijab. Returning to the classic manual of Islamic sacred law, the women depicted were murdered because they brought their family shame for not wearing the hijab, for becoming too westernized. And their parents are exempt from accountability for any crime against their children. The result of Pamela Geller's efforts is that political correctness and fear rule. So where is Ilhan Omar on the issue of women being murdered for hijab violations? The answer, she promotes it in Vogue magazine. Another troubling issue for Omar. What about stoning for adultery under Sharia? How come she hasn't been held accountable? But remember Maruna, the prohibited becomes permissible for the cause of Allah. So what's being promoted? The liberals. This shows that Islam liberates women and permits sexual promiscuity. Indeed, where is Nike on the issue of women being murdered and sexually assaulted? Just like siding with NFL protesters, Nike is again on the wrong side of the issue. So what are the rules? What are the rules that Sharia imposes on women's dress codes? Clearly, the women on the right are obedient in both pictures, and the ones on the left represent women who are in rebellion. Again, chapter 33, verse 59, O Prophet, tell your wives and daughters to draw their veils all over their bodies so that they will be known and not harmed. Allah directs women to be totally covered, not for religious reasons, but for political ones. So Muslim women will be recognized as Sharia compliant in their subservient role to men, which protects them from being harmed by Muslim men if they fail to comply. Thus, any woman failing to comply signifies she's in a state of rebellion to Allah, for which she can be punished, often sexually, through rape. Remember what happened to Laura Logan in Cairo, Egypt. More dress rules. Again, nothing to do with religion. Don't bring attention to yourself, ladies. No cosmetics, no makeup. And don't let your eyes wander. No wearing of jewelry, and keep quiet. And then watch how you speak to men. All of these rules have a singular purpose, to prevent men from being tempted. For it's a woman's obligation under Sharia not to tempt men, or they'll be punished for it. Now that we know what the Islamic dress code for women is, let's see how violators are being punished in Europe. Tarish, which means collective harassment, and is the new rape game played out in public. We see it played out by this woman here, clearly in violation of Islamic dress codes in a public setting, who is singled out, identified by Muslim men, then surrounded, taken to the ground, where she is sexually assaulted. All done in public. And then other examples of how women are treated in public spaces by Muslim men. All for violating dress codes. Not to be aware of this is deliberate indifference. So we see by this that under Sharia law, there's a variety of mandates and there are many deceivers who are working very hard to keep this information from you. This is all deliberate indifference, concealing crimes for the sake of Islam. On November 3rd of this year, the Middle East Research Institute reported about a campaign being waged by Gaza women to publicize their beatings by their Muslim husbands. You can see this displayed vividly by the two women on the far left and the one to her immediate right, where they are not concealing the bruises that they have suffered at the hands of their husbands. Unfortunately, there is a high price for speaking the truth, as Christine Douglas Williams found out, as described in a Center of Security Policy report dated September 20th of last year. Another Muslim activist, Shireen Kadosi, who publishes the Cadosi Chronicles, one of the good guys, warns us about the new form of peer censorship or peer policing. Targeting people on the social media deemed offensive to Islam. We would be remiss if we did not address one of the biggest deceptions currently underway, the systemic and purposeful persecution of Christians throughout the Middle East and in many African countries. Raymond Ibrahim has thoroughly documented the historical genesis of the problem that is embedded in the Islamic ideology. What we must confront is why we know so little about the persecution and its extent. To address this, Ibrahim identifies three contributing factors, and I'll offer a fourth. The first is because of political correctness and the money that academic officials receive, that they totally whitewash Islam and the threat to women. Many in the media have attended Middle Eastern study programs like these, all influenced by academics who whitewash Islam and who hate Christians and Jews. As for Obama, in the words of Raymond Ibrahim, quote, the Obama administration not only ignored Muslim persecution of Christians, but also actually enabled it through his support of the Arab Spring and empowerment of the Muslim Brotherhood. My fourth reason is this one. Passive pastors and rabbis to shepherd their flocks, to warn us and to take action against the problem of the genocide against Christians. Both Islam and Marxism have penetrated Christianity, as documented here by Brannon House. Nevertheless, most are unaware and don't want to know the truth. Collectively, most pastors and rabbis have a Western mindset about religions. We're in a spiritual battle. We tend to believe all religions deal with good versus evil, how to overcome temptations, offer eternal life in some non-earthly realm, through a supreme being in charge, who offers moral guidelines. Thus, all religions deserve equal protection. What the deceivers don't tell us is there's a long list of Sharia-sanctioned practices that are criminal. From violence against women, female genital mutilation, polygamy, stoning of rape victims, pedophilia, temporary marriages or prostitution, honor killings and violence, killing of apostates and non-believers, providing support for those fighting for Allah, violent jihad and subversion. All are a violation of U.S. laws. Unfortunately, there are many useful idiots who just choose to ignore the problem. And the truth is being ignored by our religious leaders who are supposed to be our shepherds. Here, Pope Francis cavorts with the former president of Egypt's Al-Azhar University, Sheikh Al-Taib, who promotes killing of apostates and those who speak ill of Islam and Muhammad. But little details like Sharia crimes are conveniently swept aside for dialogue in the common word, canard, that we all worship the same God. Recall at the outset, we saw where Allah claims to be the biggest deceiver. Our pastors and rabbis are living proof. So here we are again where we started, the two axes of attacks against us, the one we've been talking about tonight, the soft jihad. But nonetheless, it complements the violent jihad as well. Unfortunately, the fundamentalists aren't the only threat to America. There's the Red-Green Alliance that James Simpson and others have been warning us about. So here are some action steps for tonight. First, stay informed. There are numerous references posted on the United West website that you can use. Attend national security events in your area, or better yet, sponsor one. We'd be more than happy to come and talk in your area. Hold your pastors and rabbis accountable. And confront the deceivers, but confront the deceivers with ammunition that you know what you're talking about. So I say take these verses down, write them down so you know them, and you can challenge deceivers when they come to your area that Islam is peaceful and does not represent any kind of a problem for women. All of these references tell us otherwise. So one more look at the deceivers we've met tonight and the many brave women, non-Muslim and Muslim alike, who are speaking out. And this group, a Middle Eastern Women's Coalition, endorsing Trump and also attempting to stand up for what's right. Against these people, Brotherhood deceivers working to subvert our Constitution in the United States. The alternative of not knowing and understanding what we face is certain defeat.
David, thank you so much. This is an exceptional presentation, and this is brings me back to why I'm involved in Sharia Crime Stoppers. You just talked about things that are criminal, and yet the deceivers will cover that up. This is just a marvelous presentation. I guess to me, the single action item I would suggest, as on top of the ones you did, is everyone who's listening to this, who views this, needs to get this in front of other people. This is critical. And David, the deception is very successful. You can just see how successful it is. And David, you're going to stick with us for a couple of minutes while we do some administrative work on other things, and then we will we'll proceed from there. David, one of the comments, just while we're getting going here, is just how this deception works with women deceiving women. It is extraordinary to see how women are targeted by other women who are in the deception business. And it would seem to me the key message here is that women in America need to take this presentation, do the homework you're suggesting, and be prepared to disrupt the deception because it's targeted at them.
What's especially needed is for women to properly counsel and advise their daughters. The daughters of are being targeted in colleges and universities. They're taking up the cause of this deception. They're showing support for Muslim women by downing the hijab, by making false claims about how peaceful Islam is and how women have nothing to fear. They're also being seduced by Muslim men into marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And they quickly find out when the children are abducted by their new Muslim husbands and taken to the Middle East that they lose all contact with their children. They are soon divorced, and the Muslim men do the exact same thing all over again. This is part of demographic jihad to increase the population through population explosion and through birth. So there's a lot here to assimilate, to try to understand, but nonetheless, the soft jihad is alive and well. It's occurring right in front of our eyes, and we have to be alert for it.
One other quick comment before we move on, David. I think the number of women candidates for office, so you've got Muslim women running for office all over the country, not just Ilhan and Rashida. And if you look at the Engage organization, which is the Empowerment for Muslim Candidates, all of their content, all of their displays show women, Muslim women, in hijabs or not, running for office. And the platform is always the Bernie Sanders progressive platform. It's all about the progressive issues, totally deceiving any association with their Islam allegiance, their commitment to following Muhammad. So the cover up of the deception is there, and it's very powerful. I guess my comment is we need women to challenge these women candidates in particular and bring forward some of the questions that you've put on the table tonight.
Absolutely. This is just what you described is just another example of the authoritarian globalist alliance between the far left and the fundamentalists. And they're taking up the cudgels working together to take charge of not only our country, but as much of the world as possible. And remember their definition of peace: no coexistence. Only when Sharia law is firmly established can there be peace. Now, eventually, these two sides of the alliance are going to duke it out, and I'm putting my bet on the Islamists will eventually win if this is allowed to continue. So you're absolutely right. We need more women to speak out and to challenge the deceivers and to challenge the Muslim women who are running for political office.
We want to highlight some of the resources available, whether you're a man or a woman and you're paying attention tonight. Remember, the United West is absolutely loaded with resources. This presentation will be on the website shortly, and there's just so much information. Resources and training is a page at the United West. You can go there and find books and websites and all kind of material as well. I want to point out that there's a YouTube channel called Sharia Crime Stoppers, where this and all the other presentations we've done in the webinar series over the last year and a half are posted. Our good friend Mary collects them into playlists. For example, there's a one-of-a-kind playlist with 16 episodes. It is David Boris last year recorded 16 hours of training material targeted at law enforcement. That material is there online. If you go to the playlist at the Sharia Crime Stoppers YouTube location, and you certainly could invite anybody in law enforcement to just sample one of those things. Look at what David can provide in law enforcement training. Again, David does provide the law enforcement training in person as well, and that's available at no charge other than travel. So keep that in mind as you decide how you're going to prepare for 2020 as well. In terms of women in Sharia, there's even a 7-episode playlist online there as well. These are 3 to 10-minute video clips that you can use to bring women into the conversation about their own jeopardy as Sharia spreads across America, including the way that it's spreading through the deception that David talked about. And again, we have actually at this point 350 or so days to go to the big election where the future of the country will be decided. So we want you to prepare as well. We're going to just continue to talk about what's coming up. So we are going to have a holiday break. We will reconvene in 2020 in the winter time. Webinars will continue on Mondays, not just Tuesdays. And we have very exciting news about Monday news programs. These will be every Monday. There will be news analysts about current news in the 2020 period. And Claire Lopez is going to kick that off with her news analysis program on the 13th of January, and then continue every other Monday. So the 13th, Claire Lopez on her views on the news. On the 27th, well, what's going to happen on the other Mondays? Well, good news is Christine Douglas Williams, that actually was in David's presentation, will be with us on the other Mondays. So we'll have Christine starting her every other Monday news analysis program on the 20th, and then coming back on the 3rd. So Claire Lopez and then Christine on Monday. So reserve Mondays for the current news, and then we'll continue on Tuesday, starting again in January on the 14th. We're very excited to have Robert Spencer. These Tuesday shows will continue to be like tonight's, which is an in-depth citizen briefing with an opportunity for you to ask questions. So that'll continue on Tuesdays throughout the winter season and throughout 2020. Actually, David, you'll be back with us on a monthly basis in the winter season as well. So we're looking forward for a busy Monday, a busy Tuesday in 2020 as needed, given the importance of the 2020 fight. You're registered. You got this webinar tonight. You're going to be registered for, and you will get reminders for Monday nights and Tuesday nights as we proceed. Please spread the message. Get other people to register. Maybe over the holidays, an action item would be to get people to sample what we do and register for the 2020 season. Everything we do is free, and we want to invite you to join us. Again, in summarizing now, we are preparing for the 2020 fight. You do that by participating and spreading the message. We think we're in World War III. I think David has done a superb job in person and certainly online for us to explain that. World War III is happening, and it's happening largely in the soft jihad through women deceiving women. We want you to really focus on that. But there's more deception. We just had some news this week. The Wall Street Journal reported that Google, worldwide Google, World War III Google, is interfering with it in its search with finding conservative websites. Specifically, the Wall Street Journal called out the interfering of Google searchers to find information like we just heard tonight on United West, as well as Gateway Pundit. We were identified as two of over 100 on a particular blacklist. This was actually reported on Fox News, so it is happening, and we wanted to make you aware of that. Again, we are the United West. As you think through your holiday giving, if you'd like to help us continue this, please consider donating so we can make America think again. Again, let me thank David Boris for this outstanding presentation. Invite you to keep active with the United West and join us again as we kick this off on the 13th of January. With that, let us wish you a happy holiday season, happy Thanksgiving, happy Hanukkah, and Merry Christmas. And again, we'll see you in the new year. Good night.